The GOP and DFL endorsing conventions may be over, but the race for Minnesota governor has gotten more complicated, not less. The GOP endorsed candidate Jeff Johnson will face former Governor Tim Pawlenty in an August 14th primary. And also on that primary day, the DFL endorsed candidate Representative Erin Murphy will face Congressman Tim Walz. Here to help us sort out the results, Professor David Schultz of Hamline University. Thank you so much for coming in.
You're welcome, of course.
Let's talk about Representative Erin Murphy. This was a bit of a surprise that she was able to pull this out. What was the difference here?
I think a couple things happened. One is she got into the race early. She did a lot of traveling. If campaigning means anything, and I think it does, she visited lots of places. But also in the last week, you could see that she was getting lots of major public sector union endorsements and private sector ones. And I think that helped also. And I think she was working very hard in flipping the delegates. Right. So I think a combination of those things were very important. Plus, I think she was getting the support of the urban liberals, of which Tim Walz never got that support.
Right. Interesting that her celebratory dance is actually going sort of viral in a mini way on social media. Really sort of a unique response, one that you don't see from Minnesota politicians. Your thoughts on that?
I was going to say yes. I mean, generally we think of ourselves as a pretty reserved state. I was kidding with Jeff Johnson before we went on the air and said, I think he ought to do that at the Republican convention.
Maybe that's the answer.
Yes. I don't know. I don't know how good of a dancer he is. I'll let him make that decision.
Okay.
But clearly I think sometimes becoming a rock star doesn't hurt in terms of your campaign.
All right. Let's talk about the race between Representative Erin Murphy and Congressman Walz. Congressman Walz has $1.6 million in the bank. Representative Murphy, maybe $400,000, looking at the financial disclosures. Is that an issue?
Well, it's an issue except for the fact as the endorsed candidate, Erin Murphy now gets the party support, mailing lists, and that'll help with some of the resources. But at the end of the day, again, we are looking at an August primary. I'm guessing total in the state between Republican and Democrats turning out, we might get 8% of the vote. This is going to be about mobilizing, small numbers of people. And I think one of the things that Tim Walz still has an advantage with is in the sense that he probably has greater appeal in greater Minnesota, and the question is going to be now how well he mobilizes in greater Minnesota, picks up some of the urban liberals versus the turnout among the urban liberals for Erin Murphy and whatever she can pick up in greater Minnesota.
All right, how about the Johnson-Pawlenty race? You just heard Commissioner Johnson say he knows he's going to be outspent in this. Again, does that not matter as much because it's an August primary?
Well, again, it's for some of the same reasons here, that money may not be as big of a factor. I still think the biggest factor, at least for the Republicans, is going to be Trump. And what I mean by Trump is that Jeff Johnson, was there supporting Donald Trump, before the election. Tim Pawlenty was not. And I think the party, Republican Party, of what it looks like now is a very different party than it was even in 2016. But clearly, the last time Tim Pawlenty won 12 years ago, I'm sorry to say. And so that we have to think in terms of where the center of the party actually is at this point.
And the president remains very popular amongst the base, amongst Republicans here in Minnesota.
Right, and we shouldn't forget the fact that Donald Trump got within 50,000 votes of being Hillary Clinton. This is a state that is politically changing, and it's very different than the state that, again, Tim Pawlenty was successful in, 12 and 16 years ago.
Okay. What happened to Laurie Swanson, a three-time attorney general, not getting the endorsement on the first ballot?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to a singular issue, guns. And what I mean by that, in 2010, she received an A+ rating from the NRA because she and many other attorney generals signed on to a Supreme Court brief saying that the Second Amendment included an individual right to bear arms. And I think that's becoming a defining issue within the Democratic Party, guns versus not. I think that's one issue. I think the second thing is about her entering the race late because she was kind of flip-flopping, running governor or not. But I also think we're starting to see this generational shift going on in the Democratic Party. If I can bring it back to Erin Murphy, if Tim Walz and Laurie Swanson represent one generation, Erin Murphy and Matt Pelican represent a different generation. And I think the Democrats come out of this convention less unified than do the Republicans coming out of their convention.
All right. Well, Professor David Schultz, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming in.
You're welcome.